remember last week we talked about dependencies, and in the course of the conversation, I sort of apologetically, is that a word? I felt embarrassed when I mentioned that SPI server, so the package that drives the Swift package index web page, is the one with the most dependencies in the index at 56.
Okay.
And when I was listening back to the episode, I thought, I've been approaching this all wrong. This is the Swift package index server package. The package that's hosting the package index, it should be using as many packages as possible. We need to embrace the index, right? Embrace the index. That's probably a tagline we should have on the site. So if anything, that number is too low. We should be aiming to have at least 1% of our packages that we use.
I have a mission. Yeah, I have a mission. I'm gonna get all the dependencies. Maybe we should just include every dependency just in case we need it.
Well, at least a few more we could do, right? Maybe we should remember when Steve Jobs announced the iPhone and said, wants to have 1% market share, we should maybe have 1%
package share
in a year. Yeah, and maybe then in the future we could aim for 2 or 3% long term. But 1%, we're close. We're 56, 63 is 10% is 1%. So we're right there. I mean, it doesn't take much.
Who else is going to test whether all these packages work together? I think we are the only.
Exactly.
We're the only answer to that question. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of easy ones we can pull in without bending over backwards too much. I'm sure something can be done. Anyway, so that was that. And then the other interesting bit of feedback we got was from Joe Heck. So he sent us a follow-up email. We've talked about JavaScript dependency trees, how they tend to be big and self-referencing in ways we found puzzling. And he said he suspects the reason is that the dependency trees in JavaScript are independent. So, and my understanding was, if this is as if, so Swift Package Manager, when you do package resolution, it looks at the whole thing and resolves one version and one version only per package that is used for your artifact. And sometimes that doesn't work, right? There is no package resolution because one package has a certain range for a dependency and another package has another incompatible range, and then package resolution fails entirely. My understanding is in JavaScript, that would still work because you have two independent subtrees that both use that dependency just at different versions. And I think the analogy in Swift is as if every dependency was built like a binary artifact, and then you pull those binary artifacts in and link them into your binary at the end, such that they're sort of opaque.
Yeah, pretty much, but it's not binary, of course, it's just source code. So the slightly annoying thing is I actually knew this already and I just it slipped my mind completely when we were talking about it last week. And it is an interesting approach, but it brings with it as many problems as it solves.
Yeah, it's interesting how these different approaches potentially lead to different outcomes. I mean, we don't have the numbers. There were some similarities between JavaScript's ecosystem and Rust. And Rust, I believe, doesn't have that same approach. So the fact that they also have circular references might indicate that would happen in Swift as well. Again, we'll do this at some point, and then we'll find out.
I still can't explain why some packages reference themselves. Wasn't that a thing?
Yeah, not only that, I think even directly, which I found super baffling.
So the two dependency cycle is now explained more readily, but the one package dependency cycle is still a mystery to me.
Yeah, that pretty much is a mystery. I wonder if that's something that was wrong within. But his analysis looked very thorough and considered. So it doesn't look like this was a data mess up or anything like it. We'll see.
And if you're wondering what we're talking about, you should go back and listen to the previous episode where we talk about this blog post about JavaScript dependencies, and you'll hear all the background to what we're following up here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. That was the follow-up that I have in my notes.
One thing we can talk about this week is we had a pull request merged as a result of the Swift mentorship program. So we've been participating in the mentorship program for 3 years now. This is our third year of participation. And I've been working with Cindy Chin to work on some of our package scoring code. And so there's actually been a couple of pull requests merged by Cindy already. The project that we're working on is all around package score and how we determine it and how we surface what the package score is. And so package authors can see their package score and things like that. And we got started with one pull request almost at the beginning of the program. And then this week we merged another pull request, which is part of the scoring mechanism. So we're adding an extra dimension to scoring. So we have this internal package score, which is what we use. It's not entirely the sort order for search results, but it contributes to the sort order for search results. And we want to make that package score represent, or should we say, we want to make that package score increase when good quality packages should naturally increase that package score. So, for example, if a package has been maintained recently, it had a issue closed or a pull request closed or a commit or something like that, then we count that as a recently maintained package, and that adds to the score. If the package repository is archived, we don't give any points for that, but if it's not archived, we give some points for that. And there's several. You can have a look at the source. In fact, we'll give a link to the source code in the show notes because the algorithm is transparent and open, and we've added to it, or Cindy has added to it this week by adding a score increase if your package has a test target. Now, there's pros and cons to this score increase for test targets. It is just about the simplest implementation of, are there tests in this package? And what it does is it looks through the targets in the package manifest. And if you have a test target, then it says then you probably have some tests. Now, depending on how you made your package, you might have got a test target for free and might have never added any actual test to it. So there's an element of this which we would like to improve again in the future, but this progress towards a better system, right? This is how software development works. We step one foot in front of another.
Yeah, I think it would be good as a second step to try and at least reject the common case where, someone has just created a template package and sort of got the points for free, and someone who actually cleaned up the template and removed stuff they weren't using would actually be sort of punished for doing the tidying up. That's probably something we can do at some point. It doesn't sound like it's. I could imagine there are ways to do that aren't overly complicated. Just briefly thinking about it, devil might be in the details, but
yeah,
it's the sort of thing that is probably one metric that is going to be really interesting for someone looking for a package test coverage, one way or another. If it's by counting targets or number of tests, or ideally actual coverage, is a really interesting metric. But obviously, it's also hard to get, right? Test coverage is really hard to obtain unless you run the tests, and running the tests isn't something we'll probably ever do or be able to do, because ACI system is notoriously difficult to set up even if you own the project, and probably impossible to do if you don't own it. So
yeah, CI is hard to set up if you're being paid to set it up. Yeah. Let alone us setting it up for every project that exists.
I really like messing with tests and CI, but the prospect of managing hundreds of CI systems of packages I don't own isn't one I cherish.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the kind of thing that I also don't think we'll ever go to that level with the package index compatibility system, but we could certainly do more to start actually looking for number of tests. I probably wouldn't want to even report, even if we could. I mean, obviously we'd need to run the tests, but even if we could find a way to do that, I wouldn't even particularly want to report code coverage. But I think a simple number of tests is a great metric that we'll potentially work towards going forward.
Yeah, and I think that might be feasible with Swift syntax if you really want to look at the source code, or maybe even some simple heuristics that might be wrong, but in some edge cases, but generally have a good result. That might work too.
Yeah,
I think there are ways to arrive there that aren't overly complicated.
And then the next stage of Cindy's work on the mentorship program is to explain that score. So I said a few minutes ago, I said we put a link to the source code in. Linking to the source code is one way to tell people how their package is scored, but it's not a great way. It is, however, the way that we've been relying on so far. But the next piece of work that Cindy is currently working on, in fact, I had a meeting with her about an hour ago, where we looked at a prototype of this working on her branch, is to so we have a page for package maintainers, where we give people the markdown for the compatibility badges that they can put in their README, and links to how to configure the documentation, things like that. And at the bottom of that page, we're going to have a section where it tells people what the package score is, and then has a table underneath that score to also explain how the points were tallied and why the points were tallied, so that you can take a look at your package if you have a package in the index and see, okay, well, this is why I got this score, and if I would like to improve my score, this is what I need to do. And if all of this works, then those things that you do to improve your score will also make your package better. So hopefully there'll be no gaming of the system.
I was just going to say, we're going to publish the recipe to game the system. I think there's obviously going to be a little bit of that, and we can't stop that, nor would I particularly be interested in stopping it. But I think as long as we should be transparent with what the score is. I mean, we are being transparent by definition because it's an open source project, so we can't. I mean, we could hide it, we could put it in a private package, but I definitely don't want to do that. So it is already open. This is just explaining it, basically. Yeah. And, if we get people to add documentation to their package, even if it's bare bones, that's still a win. If that's the level of gaming
it's still a win
we arrive at, that's fine. That's good, because then it's easier next time around to just do a little more, that other little bit of documentation, because you've already set it up. Why not use it?
It's like a broccoli eating competition. You can cheat and eat a load of broccoli, and at the end of it, you're just more healthy. That doesn't work at all.
It sounds like you don't like broccoli. I actually love broccoli. That didn't sound like...
I love broccoli. I think I would even go as far as to say broccoli is my favorite vegetable. That's funny. I don't know whether that'll make the edit.
Leave it in.
The last thing to mention here is that Cindy was very keen with her mentorship to do a feature end to end. And so we started off with some planning of it. We talked about possibilities. We talked about, should we even display the score? Where should we display it? We toyed with having it on the package page. So we did a little kind of feature design at the beginning. We also wanted at least one more kind of indicator into that score, which is this test target pull request that got merged. But I think the other thing, which is really nice to see, is that she wanted to take this feature right through to launching it. And the last pull request on this project for her will hopefully be a blog post announcing the thing. So it's literally
nice.
from what are we even going to do, through to several pull requests to add some functionality, through to launching it and publicizing it and getting the word out about what we're doing.
Very nice.
Which I think is it's such a great attitude. It's not over yet, but it's been a pleasure working with Cindy so far.
That sounds great. All right, in other news, we have upgraded our build system to the release version of Swift 5.9, which is probably not a big change for most packages. We were still running on an early version of the Swift 5.9 beta, but I don't think there were many packages that had any build differences between the two. The biggest change is probably that we're also now generating a documentation by default with 5.9, because the documentation generation always happens on the latest release version in our system. And as long as we're on a pre-release version, we don't switch documentation generation over yet. So if you haven't specified a Swift version for your doc generation, from now on, your docs will be generated with 5.9. That's also probably not a big change between 5.8, 5.9. Do you actually know what the doc-C differences are between the two versions? I don't think there was any.
The quick navigation was 5.8, right?
Yeah, that was a very user-facing feature that came with 5.8, but 5.9, I don't think there's anything in the UI. I believe there was a default change when it comes to generating documentation for extensions, but I'm always a bit hazy on what goes in when and what default is enabled when. But it might be a good idea if you have documentation and you release a new version or just the main branch, have a look at your docs for that version to make sure that everything looks as you expect it to. And if you see any issues, make sure you generate your documentation locally with Swift 5.9 to see if they get the same result. And if there's any discrepancy, let us know. If there are any errors, let us know, and we'll take a closer look. That's just a heads up around that change.
Absolutely.
Shall we do some packages?
Yeah, let's do some packages, and I will start us off this week with a package by Miguel de Casa called Swift Godot or Godot, which is something that I've been paying a little bit of attention to for a little while now. So I don't know whether you heard in the last couple of weeks, Unity put their foot squarely in their mouth with a change of business plan that really was not very well thought through and was to say the least badly received by the Unity community.
One could say there was discord in the Unity community.
Well, one could if one wanted to, yes, but let's hope one doesn't want to. It was a terrible PR disaster. And I'm not a Unity user. I've downloaded it and had a very, very cursory play with it, but I definitely wouldn't call myself a user of it. But one thing that I had been kind of keeping my eye on is this open source game framework called Godot or Godot. I'm not quite sure what the pronunciation is. And I think they had a huge boost in publicity when this Unity announcement went bad, because everyone suddenly starts looking for, well, maybe what else is available. And Miguel has put together some bindings for the framework using Swift. So there is apparently a new extension system in the framework that you can hook into and then interact with the game objects. So the default language for this framework is actually a language called GDScript, which it's a little like Python in that it uses indentation for structure, but also there's certainly a couple of shades of Swift in there with var statements and func statements and things like that. So it's GDScript itself is one option for interacting with this framework, but now you can actually also use Swift. And I just want to call out what a fantastic job I don't know how, I haven't used this package, but what a fantastic job Miguel has done with documenting this package, even down to hosting a tutorial, a 50-minute long tutorial using the Doxy tutorial framework to get you started with building a game with Swift using this framework.
Nice. Yeah, this was actually also on my list. Actually, the first one.
Oh, I sniped you.
Sniped, got in first. Yeah, and I picked it for the same reason. With the Unity stuff going on. It's really interesting. Yeah, I saw. I didn't actually see that there was this long a tutorial in it, and I think tutorials can be quite fiddly to generate. So creating a tutorial that long is quite the task. That's amazing.
So from the README file, if you click through to the API documentation, you'll end up on a Doxy generated documentation set, which is unfortunately not hosted with package index, but we'll forgive Miguel just this one time. And the very first link on that documentation is to the tutorial. It's called Meet Swift Godot, and it is estimated at 50 minutes of development.
Nice. The other thing perhaps worth mentioning is there is a binary package that also comes with Swift or is associated with Swift Godot. And the advantage here is that he has packaged the underlying library up in a binary artifact. So you don't need to actually build the whole framework to use it. And that should probably help with your just user experience using that package. I haven't tried this. So I don't know how this worked. I did have a quick look into how to set this up, but I quickly gave up when I saw what all is needed to do this. And game dev is a bit like cooking for me. I've sort of chosen to specialize in eating, so I'm much better at playing games than doing anything around creating them. So I pretty much waved the flag immediately.
I have had a play with the framework itself way before the Unity stuff. I investigated it maybe 6 months ago, but I didn't do anything apart from write a little GD script, which is just the default.
Right.
So that's my first package recommendation. I think we are going with Godot, right?
I think so. That's how I had it in my head.
Right.
Probably needs some sort of a phonetic spelling out as a exactly. Metadata field on all these packages.
So that's Swift Godot by Miguel Diacaza.
Nice. Right, my first pick is called Swift SDK Generator by that little company called Apple. And this is of particular interest to me. It's a package for cross-compilation. It's a cross-compilation toolkit and was, I think, released just last week or the week before. So there have been some Swift proposal around this. Swift proposals that went through a while back, but this is the first part of the whole cross-compilation story that is actually usable and does work, but in limited ways. So currently what it supports is cross-compilation from macOS to Linux. And the way this works is use this SDK generator to create a Swift SDK toolkit. So it's sort of a bundle. You can bundle up, it's 2.5 gigabytes of stuff, essentially Linux stuff that you bundle together, and it's by Linux version. So there are slight differences between different Linux distributions. So you need to do this typically per Linux distribution. I've tried this for Ubuntu Jammy, for instance, and obviously also by platform. And then you package this together, and then you can import this into your Swift compiler toolchain effectively. And after you've done that, you can run Swift build, and it's currently an experimental flag. So you do Swift build -- experimental Swift SDK, and then you reference the SDK you've just created, and you effectively give it a Swift version number, a platform version label, and architecture. So like 5.9 release Ubuntu Jammy,
right?
ARC64 for the ARM version of it. You specify that as the identifier for that SDK, and then you can cross-compile on Mac as a Linux binary. And you can copy that over to Linux Docker image, for instance, a Docker container, and then run it. And I've tried that; it works just fine. Really nice. And I mean, obviously, this is probably not the most interesting path yet, right? Compiling from macOS to Linux, because if you are looking to perhaps save some money on your CI, the macOS as the platform to run stuff on is probably not the cheapest option you have. I don't know what the plans are, if it's ever going to be possible to do it the other way around, like on Linux to cross-compile to macOS. I'm not sure how that would work with licensing and all that.
Right.
But that would be, for us, for instance, that would be really interesting, because currently Linux is a very easy platform for us to manage and maintain with respect to Swift versions, whereas macOS, interestingly, is the most complicated one. We might have a little story to tell in the future how that might be possible to make a bit easier, but currently it's a bit of a fiddly system with respect to macOS versions and Xcode versions to manage. I really hope that at some point these SDK setups become really universal in that they support lots of different combinations. I mean, ideally all of them, but that might never be possible. But the more combinations are covered by this, the better, really.
And I think that's the key thing here, is that this may be a package which will become more useful or more used in the future. But it's good to see that there's thought and planning going into this now.
Yeah, I mean, just the effort that this exists and works is amazing. I think this is a really great and strong indicator of where we're heading here, because I mean, none of the Apple packages strike you as efforts that happen now and then, don't go anywhere. I think these are all long-term strategic things that are just being started now, and
yes,
are intended to be used and to grow. So this is really exciting, and the fact that this already works and is usable is compelling. I'm not sure it's something that would help us immediately. I mean, I could see how it could make some of our build system easier. So if we were to use this, it would make actually parts of our setup easier. It would make other parts of our setup harder. So it currently would be a trade-off, but just the fact that this exists would give us an option in dealing with certain complexities in our system.
Yeah.
And I can, envision that in the future, this might make lots of things just easier in general, where right now we have to do a lot of special casing. So I'm really looking forward to how this package develops in the future.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to see. My next package is Zip Pinch by Alexei Butkin. And this package kind of blew my mind when I found it. It's actually not a new package at all. It's been in development for 8 years. So this is a very well established open source package. It's not I don't think it's a particularly terribly complicated package, because in those 8 years it's only had 48 commits, but that's not to put it down at all. It's just, some jobs are big, some jobs are small. But what blew my mind is what it does. And what it does is it's an extension for URL session to work with zip files remotely. So you can open, peek inside, read and write to a zip file without downloading the file locally, which absolutely blew my mind. Now, it's been a very long time since I looked at the details of a pkzip file, but I do remember from when I did briefly look at it when I was a kid, basically, that it does have this kind of table of contents at the beginning, and you can reference it into the file and you can get just the bits you need and all the rest of it. But to do that remotely over a URL session kind of blew my mind a little bit. Now, you might ask, well, how useful is that? And it became more useful in my mind when I read that it was also compatible with watchOS. So I can absolutely see a situation where on the watch. You're trying not to download an entire zip file, unzip it, try and poke through what the files are inside there, but to be able to access a remote zip file and access files within that, I can see this being useful.
That's so. Is this PKZip or zip, or are they the same? I don't know. I thought PKZip was different.
PKZip was the original file format.
Right.
I mean, I know that file format has been incredibly robust. I can't say there have been no changes to the zip file format since then, but I don't think there have been many changes to it.
Right. So this is just a general zip file that you could, like, if you right click and click compress, that's the same format.
It's a zip file. Yeah, absolutely.
You'd get out. So how does that work? Does that just use HTTP offset, like head requests and stuff like that to
I haven't been digging through the source code, but that's the only way that I can think that it can work. So it must do a request to get the beginning of the file, read a little bit, read the table of contents,
right,
and then do a separate request at an offset to read the file, and then unzip the content locally. So that's Zip Pinch by Alexei Butkin.
Very nice. Right, my second pick is another package by Apple, and it's called Swift Testing. People have probably heard about this because I believe you also referenced or mentioned this in Friday's newsletter, didn't you?
Yes, I wrote my opening comment on it. Yeah.
Right, yes. You actually had a link to the vision document about the package in your
I did, yes,
opening, and it's actually, that document is hard to find. I wanted to check it out again, and the best way to find it was to go back and find that issue, because it's not actually linked from...
Well, the best way to find anything is to go to iOS Day.
Here we go. Our sponsors this week. I really love this package. When I saw this announced on the Swift forums, I was so excited, because I've long felt that XC test assert and the whole XC test framework is great. I mean, I've used this for literally decades now. Is it? I mean, this is ancient, right? And it hasn't changed really.
The word I used to describe it was fine. It's fine. It does exactly what it needs to do.
Yeah. And, at the surface, it's the same old. I learned unit testing with Java I still know the year, because it was at a conference in 2001 where I first heard about unit testing, and I was immediately taken by it. And the concept is exactly the same since then. You have a runner and you have asserts that you effectively something equals another comparison function or macro, or however it's implemented, and something that prints out if they differ, and to various degrees they print it nicely, or perhaps in the case of XCT assert less nicely, the actual difference. And what this does, it uses macros to revisit how all of this machinery is done. So for instance, you have a hash expect macro that unifies all of the XCT assert variants. So you no longer have different ones that you spell out, like XCT assert equal, and I think the other one is assert equal accuracy if you want to compare two doubles with a certain accuracy. XCT assert true false if you have booleans that you compare. All these different variables you have to use. Hash expect is a single macro that you use. It can handle all these different variants, and it gives you nicer printouts in case of error logging. I do hope that they sort of steal from the power assert library that we talked about in the past. I'll add a link to the show note. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I don't have the author's name to hand right now. It's called Power Assert. It's a macro library that gives amazing printouts of error messages when an expression is wrong. It actually details which part of the expression is what, and uses ASCII art to point to the different elements.
Yeah, it's super cool.
So you can immediately see it's an amazing library, and I hope they steal or in some shape or form absorb the awesomeness of this package into the Swift testing package, so we have it available without having to import anything extra. It also adds @test annotations to your test functions, so it's not any longer required to adhere to certain naming conventions to make tests discoverable. So there's no longer test underscore naming of functions. They can be named anything, and you have the @test annotation, and you can even give your tests speaking names, like proper descriptions, what they do. By default, if you don't do anything, it'll just use the test name as the test name, but you can override that and even use like normal strings with spaces and all that to spell out what the test does. Really nice. It's just a modern test suite, really. It has parameterized testing, so you can run many tests that just differ in input parameters. And the documentation is already great. There's a great guide on how to convert tests over. I've actually tried this out with one of our packages to see how this works and if it's already usable, and it is. I think the only thing I noticed is that there is no class setup function at the moment. So a class test up, if you have a XC-test case, if you have a class setup, it runs once per suite, whereas a instance setup runs before each test.
Mm-hmm.
So right now you'd have to sort of fake that by keeping a little boolean around where you mark if it's run already, if you have need for that. But other than that, everything I needed to convert over that test was there, and the output is nice. You need a nightly toolchain right now to use it, but it's all documented how to use it and looks like really great. I'm excited about this. I can't wait to have this around. I suspect it'll be Swift 5.10 when this will come. I don't think this will be any of the dot releases of 5.9, so I think we're looking at spring, but yeah, I mean, spring can't come soon enough, to be honest.
Yeah, it does look really, really great. And I think the fact that this is being developed as an open source package rather than something, because obviously testing is a big part of what iOS applications and macOS applications do, and it's a big part of what Xcode does. And there's obviously Xcode integration with XC-test in the current releases of Xcode. And I think that the fact that this is being released as a open source Swift package is a really good sign that that interface between test results and Xcode showing you test results might become a little more flexible, and that's mainly what I wrote about in the newsletter on Friday. My hope that would be the case to enable things like different testing strategies and different testing libraries. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could, if Swift could support lots of different testing approaches, not just one blessed testing approach, even if that blessed testing approach is great.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure it will be, because I mean, functionally, it's a drop-in replacement for the existing system, and there are lots of other packages, quick and nimble, that are built alongside, at least, if not on top of XC-test. Like Point Free also have a number of test extension packages which make use of XC-test, and all this should still just work, and be possible to extend and build on top of.
Of course, yeah. But the problem with those things, especially quick and nimble, is that the way that Xcode reports those tests is because everything has to effectively be done within one XC-test, and so your test suite passes or fails, and they do things to make that a little easier. But I'm hoping that this ushers in a new era of decoupling the tight integration between that.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that this is an open source package gives all these developers of these test extensions an opportunity to chime in, and they already have. I've seen Steven Sellis listing their packages and highlighting in which ways they build on top of XC-test, and sort of hinting at these would be potentially useful things to have in inside this package, right? So you don't need to actually onboard different new test libraries. And he didn't say so, but I'm pretty sure that Stephen and Brandon would be happy to see functionality moved out of their packages into a core testing library,
right?
Such that they wouldn't have to maintain it anymore and could use it. So I'm really excited about this for all these reasons. It's built out in the open and gives all of these other test extension packages and authors a chance to influence the direction. And I think that looks really, really great and promising.
Yeah, it is. It's great. Okay. I'm going to start my last package recommendation this week with a question for you, Sven.
Oh dear, is it quiz time again?
Kind of. It's just a one-question quiz. How many times have you written a regular expression to detect an email address?
Not a lot, to be honest. I don't...
Not a lot, but probably more than 0, right?
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I know... I'd probably look for I know this is a hotly debated topic, like using regex stuff to parse certain things. And I know,
sure.
Especially the email spec is not as easy as you think it is, right? Even the domain name spec isn't as easy as you think it is. So,
and you have to incorporate all the domain name spec plus the email spec, right? Yeah.
I might even go so far as just to look for a single @ sign and make that depending on how rigorous the check has to be. But
sure, and that's the temptation. It feels like such an easy problem to solve. You just go, well, we'll just split on the @ and then if it's got a dot on the right hand side and something that's kind of alphanumeric characters on the left hand side, we're fine, right? It feels so easy. But it's never that easy. So my final recommendation for this week is by Dave Poirier, and it's called Swift Email Validator. And one thing that I didn't even realize till I read this README is that you mentioned the email spec. Well, actually, there are 5 email specs.
Of course there are.
There's RFC 822, 2047, 5321, 5322 for the stuff they forgot to put in 5321, and RFC 6531. So yeah, this email addresses are notoriously difficult to validate. And most of the time you might just offload that functionality to your backend server. You might just say, take your iOS app or your Mac app, pass whatever the input is back to your server. But if you do want to do some smart validation on the client, I think the comprehensive nature of this package by Dave Poirier is worth taking a look at. It certainly seems to be extremely comprehensive. You can have email addresses that have IP addresses in them. You can have email addresses that have IPv6 IP addresses in them.
God, yeah. God, yeah, it's all that, isn't it? Yeah,
and suddenly the can is open and the worms are everywhere. Yes. So yes, do not try and write a regular expression to validate email. You will get it wrong. And I mean, that doesn't even start to think about all the internationalization character sets and all sorts of stuff. They're all valid in email. So yeah, it's a difficult thing to do. So maybe try this package by Dave instead. That's Swift Email Validator by Dave Poirier.
Nice. Well, at the very least, you'll have someone to yell at if it doesn't work. Great. Well, I don't have a third. Well, I did have a third package, but you sniped that, so I'm out.
But I sniped it. Yeah. So we will call that an episode, and we will see you back here in a couple of weeks.
See you in 2 weeks. Bye bye.
See you then. Bye bye.